Within the same year, the Eritrean people established their first anti-colonial patriotic association and called it Mahbar Fikr Hagar Eritrea, which is also known as the Association for the Love of the Country of Eritrea. This association became an immediate target for the British and the Ethiopians. While the Ethiopians sent their agents to split the association on religious and ethnic lines, the British started to propagate the colonial argument that Eritrea was too poor to become an independent state. In order to prove its point, it dismantled hundreds of buildings and factories. In 1949, the British administered Eritrea as a United Nations Trust territory. By this time, prominent Eritrean leaders had their lives threatened. 7 attempts were made on the life of Walda Abdul Mariam, who was the Vice Secretary General of the Independence Bloc during the period between 1947 and 1943, one of which seriously injured him. The president of the Eritrean Assembly at the time, Ali Musa Radai, got ordered to resign by Haile Selassie, which then led to massive demonstrations and general strikes organized by the underground Eritrean Labor Union in all major Eritrean cities. The Ethiopian government responded with brutal force by killing and jailing all protesters. In 1952, the United Nations decided to make Eritrea a federal component of Ethiopia despite the protests of Eritrean people to determine their own destiny. The United States intentions to build a communications base in Asmara from which to monitor the African, Asian, and Middle Eastern regions, and equally Ethiopia's desire to have access to the sea. With the Ethio-American conspiracy against the Eritrean people being fruitful, Haile Selassie signed the Eritrean-Ethiopian Federation Act on 11 September 1952, and Eritrea was formally federated with Ethiopia 4 days later. As a result of the annexation, on the 1st September 1961, Hamad Idris Awate and his companions fired the first shots against the occupying Ethiopian army and police. By 1974, Haile Selassie was ousted in a military coup orchestrated by the brutal colonel Mengistu Haile Mariam and received support from Cuba and the Soviets. As the war intensified, the 30-year struggle came to an end in 1991, as the Eritrean People's Liberation Front captured the Eritrean capital Asmara and formed a provisional government. After a successful referendum, by 1993 Eritrea became independent and joined the United Nations officially. However, in the period between 1998 to 2000, Eritrean-Ethiopian border clashes erupted into a full-scale war, which killed some 70,000 people. A ceasefire was brokered between the two countries, and after 3 years, the Boundary Commission was set up and ruled that the disputed border town of Badme lied in Eritrean territories. Ethiopia says the ruling is unacceptable. According to Professor Brill Mayer, which is a co-agent at the Ethiopian and Eritrean Commission, this is what she had to say in regards to the 1998 war over dispute of the town of Badme.
This war is a fraud. It's a fraud because there was no grounds for a border dispute. The border of Eritrea was fixed by a treaty in 1908 between Italy and Abyssinia and appeared on Ethiopian maps until a few years ago. It's a fraud because the world believes that Eritreans reacted aggressively, whereas I know of the long and acutely polite protests President Isaias sent off to his friend Meles. It's a fraud because the world gave implicit permission for invasion by ignoring the deportation of Eritreans from Ethiopia over the past 2 or more years.
In November 2007, Eritrea accepted the borderline demarcated by the International Boundary Commissions, which Ethiopia rejected. 2 years later, the United Nations imposed sanctions on Eritrea for its alleged support for Islamist insurgents in Somalia, including arms embargo and subject to financial sanctions. In addition to that, Ethiopia for the first time declared openly that it will support Eritrean rebel groups fighting to overthrow President Isaias Afwerki.
States is pleased with the adoption today of Resolution 2023, imposing additional sanctions on Eritrea for its failure to comply with its obligations under previous Security Council resolutions, including 1907, passed 2 years ago this month. This resolution underscores the international community's condemnation of Eritrea's destabilizing behavior in the Horn and its support for terrorism. It strengthens the provisions of 1907 and imposes additional obligations on Eritrea, limits its ability to continue to use the mining sector and the diaspora tax to fund its illicit
We
activities.
do not believe religious politics or politics of religion solves any problem, be it Christian or Muslim. We do not differentiate between moderate and radical religious tendency. It doesn't solve the problems of the real problems of communities and nations, because it could be one way of expressing injustice or fighting for, like the black Americans in the United States, when they felt they were discriminated, they had to resort to the church and pray to God that they be relieved from all the injustices they face, economic injustice, social injustice, political, cultural injustice. It happens in societies. When human beings get desperate, they resort to God, they resort to religion, they resort to something that is not temporal. That is phenomenal in our region. But we have never entertained this idea of radical Islam or Sharia becoming a solution. How can one justify Eritrea sympathizing or supporting? The situation in Somalia is a completely different story. It's a problem of a nation that has disintegrated. It's a question of a nation that has gone into crisis, internal and external crisis. Somalia does not exist. And that is the main issue in Somalia for us, at least in Eritrea. And Somalia is part of the Horn of Africa. When you have one country or one nation divided and fragmented from within, it's Somaliland, it's Puntland, it's Banadrland, it's so many lands, but beyond that, it's fragmented into clans, into tribes, into warlordism. That is very sad, and that reality has its effect on the Horn of Africa. Somalia is no other country. It's not like Eritrea. It's more than any other nation in the country. The instability in Somalia affects the stability of the whole region, and that's what we have witnessed the last 20 years. We would like Somalia to revive. We would like this nation to come to normalcy again and contribute to the stability in the region.
In July 2011, a United Nations report accused Eritrea of being behind a plot to bomb the African Union summit in Addis Ababa. As a result, later that year, the United Nations Security Council decided to tighten sanctions against Eritrea for continuing to support Islamists in Somalia. The resolution, sponsored by Nigeria and Gabon, received 13 votes in favor of passage. However, the veto-wielding member nations such as Russia and China abstained from the vote. At the time, the Western media reported that the Ethiopian National Intelligence and Security Services claiming that the bombs were part of a coordinated terror attack by the Oromo Liberation Front and Eritrean government, which were aimed at disrupting democratic development. Recently released WikiLeaks cables exposes how Ethiopian security forces planted 3 bombs that went off in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa on September 16, 2006, and then blamed Eritrea and the Oromo resistance for the blasts in a case that raises serious questions about the claims made about the bombing attempts against the African Union summit. Eritrean nationals from all over Europe staged demonstrations on 22nd of February 2010, denouncing the unfounded and vicious U.S. engineering sanction resolutions against Eritrea. The demonstrations were staged in Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Geneva at a European level, and Canberra City, Australia. They also submitted petitions representing over 100,000 signatories to pertinent UN officials. Eritrea keeps repelling these destructive attempts because the people are united. From previous experience in Eritrea, it has learned that unity is the savior of this beautiful gem. They have learned that it's only when they're united that they can honor and reward the martyred. They've also learned that the way to safeguard the legacies of the martyred is to keep the legacy alive and to safeguard Eritrea.
Eritrea is not for sale. Eritrea is not for sale. Not for Iran, not for Israel, not for the United States, for nobody.
Hey,